At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only i3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 568 of Within the Trenches, True Stories from the 911 Dispatchers Who Live Them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast. Thank you for everything, but especially all of you who are here watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. Thank you for everything. So this episode is going to be another Imagine Listening session. These are stories from dispatchers from all over the United States, and I believe some, maybe a couple from a couple other countries. Trying to remember, because this was back in April at the NAVIGATOR conference that was held in Washington, D.C. So there are 911 professionals from all over the world that attend that conference. So there are many stories that are shared. There's also stories that were written that I recorded and have added to the episode. So without further ado, here is an Imagine Listening session for Within the Trenches podcast, episode 568.
Imagine watching your son take off on his four-wheeler. You've witnessed this many times. He rides, he has fun, and all is well. Now imagine you are 911, taking a call from frantic parents who just found their son underneath his flipped four-wheeler. You listen to the parents scream as they remove it off his body. You tell them that help is on the way. You give them CPR instructions. An officer arrives, and you listen as you perform CPR. Come on, buddy. Come on. That's what you hear over the phone. This is what it's like in the trenches of 911. In this episode, you will hear stories from the I Am 911 movement, a movement I started to fight for the reclassification of dispatchers from clerical to protective and bring awareness of the types of calls that 911 dispatchers answer on a daily basis. This is an Imagine Listening session, and we are here together at Navigator 2024. Now, you heard the warning at the beginning, but I must warn you again and add that if you suffer from PTSD or have suicidal tendencies, you are listening at your own risk. The stories you're about to hear are all true and come from the dispatchers who live them. While some stories have a good outcome, the majority are horrifying. This is our reality. Your worst day is our everyday. So let's start with a bang. I want you to imagine each story. Become the dispatcher who's taking each call and imagine listening.
Thank you very much, and thanks for listening and for the opportunity to speak. So much of what goes on, as we all know, is kind of in your head. You just deal with it and work through it, and it's comforting to have a chance to kind of speak about it. The story that I want to relay happened while I was working. I work for a very small town, and I don't know if people here are from small towns, but it's a one person shop where you're the only person working. You're doing all the call taking, all the dispatching, EMD, radios, phones, walk-ins, everything all at once. It can get a little overwhelming. It's a great humbling experience to be in because you were in the hot seat and you're really running the show. But it can also be a little bit taxing as far as having to work through everything by yourself with nobody to kind of balance. I was working one keyword day, I'll say. I always say it out loud. And I started getting 911 calls for traffic accident. We have a stretch of road that is notorious for accidents. The calls I were getting were initially just a car off the road, and then subsequent calls put it as a rollover. Next call was ejection. Next call was a double ejection. Third call was there's also a child in the car seat. I get everyone there, they get on scene, and the calls just come in. The callers, the bystanders, did a great job describing what was going on to me so I could relay it to the responders to get the right help there. Ended up being a call that needed mid-flight for one of the patients. The other patient actually was deceased upon arrival in a very traumatic way that I could hear in the caller's voice. It was something they also have never seen before. It was a very catastrophic situation. There were firefighters that were off duty that were on scene, so help got there very quickly. But what stuck out to me the most was a 911 call that I got from out of state transfer. And it was the family of one of the involved parties in that vehicle. They got a crash notification on their phone that the person with his iPhone had an accident. And they couldn't get in touch with her, couldn't get in touch. Calling her. And it's in an unusual position to be in where you know what the outcome is. I tried to get a little bit of information just to make sure I knew what I was talking about. And they confirmed that, either she was in her car or she was in her boyfriend's car. Well, the car, the plate that I got back was for the boyfriend, same name, making sense, matching up. And when someone's father is calling you asking you for information, you want to be giving them that information. But at the same time, I don't know who's calling. People call all the time and pretend to be or not otherwise. And it's not my place in that moment to be giving out information that's under investigation, especially in an incident. They said they were coming down, and what ended up happening was they were able to meet with the officers who were on scene, who were able to direct them. It was kind of a really chaotic situation where one of them was med-flighted, taken by the air to a major city hospital. Obviously, the other woman was deceased. It was a crime scene situation. The child was taken to a totally different hospital. And the family was trying to figure out, okay, where is this child? This is my grandchild. She has special needs. She's scared. We don't have anyone there. And there was a lot of confusion about that. I remember asking the responders, can you at least tell me who's going? At the time, we didn't know who's going to what hospital. And they really didn't have answers either. I wasn't really sure. I'm still not sure why that wasn't able to get back to me, but it was just a chaotic scene. And we were doing the best we could to make things as easy as we could. But again, for me, it was the family. It was being in that position where you know more than the people that are calling, and you have to maintain that professionalism, and you can't give away that information that might be either part of investigation or might be said to the wrong person, or may not be the right way of saying it. I wanted to reach through that phone. I wanted to tell them what happened, and that the help was there. You do it the best way you can, but it's a challenge. And again, it's just remembering that the tone of that voice from the father, from the mother, as they're trying to figure it out. And I feel like they felt like I was giving them the wrong amount, that I wasn't being truthful, but I was just trying to operate with it the way I knew. But it was a great team approach, and again, working in a small town, I got that feedback from my responders. And there were a lot of people don't have that luxury. You get the call, you transfer the call, or you're the call taken by the dispatcher. You may never interact with those responders on scene. I had the benefit of being able to talk to them after the fact. So what the heck happened? And we dealt with it on scene. That was helpful. Thanks.
I was working one day. We also have a small shop. I had a part-time that day. We didn't have the floor, and I received a 911 call. He was screaming in my ear. The child's been shot. She's screaming to where I cannot understand her. Finally get a name out of her. Realize she's somebody that I went to school with and my sister. And about 2 minutes into the call, she goes, "It's one of your dispatcher's sons." And I said, "I'm sorry, what?" He said, "He's working right now. He's in the room with you. It's so-and-so." And I said, "Crap." So I didn't say anything. I didn't put a cat note in because I knew what that was going to do. We got all the help there. Questioning, staying on the phone. We got there, and it felt like it was a lifetime. And I got up out of my seat, ran to my director's office, and I go, "I'm sending him home. You need to activate. Run back out. You need to leave." And he goes, "Why?" He did not realize it. And then, "Your son. Your son. So-and-so." And just, you see the color. I'm just sitting there. Do the right thing. Whatever, whatever. I didn't realize how much it affected me until we did a hiring. And I had to listen. Dang. I didn't realize it. Child. Chunky. So it went through his cheek and he has scars from his kid. And the dispatcher. It made me feel so proud when he brought him in the other day and he goes, "So this is Daddy. I'm going to tell you about her one day. She's really special." And I was like, "You can break my heart. Get out of here."
I got to follow that. That was an amazing story. So mine also involves a shooting, and we get our first call. Somebody else got the first call on this, and the call is, I heard loud argument in one of the apartments in my building. I heard a gunshot. Somebody's been shot, and that's basically all we had. Third party didn't see anything; they just heard stuff. And so we're kind of scrambling. What are we responding to? We don't know anything. We have a suspect description. We're sure it was a gunshot. You treat it like it is. So we're responding. We're making sure that the officers know what's going on. We're staging the case. The phone rings. We take a phone call from an elderly woman who says, "I've been shot. He shot my granddaughter, and he shot me." His granddaughter's boyfriend, she was pregnant with his child. He shot them both, fled to a city north of us, but obviously stayed on the line. There came a point where she shit. We're in the medics because that's agonal breathing. And I knew she was dead.
I took a call from a man that was having difficulty breathing. His breathing was so bad that I could not understand what his address was. And of course, his phone was not plotting correctly. It was bouncing all over the place. I tried to get his name and still could not understand him. Soon after, he stopped responding to me. I transferred the call to EMS, told them what was going on, and they said they would call him back. I hung up, did some research on his phone number, and finally found out his address, sent officers, and told EMS the correct address. By the time they arrived and kicked in his door, he had passed away on the couch with his phone in his hand. I will always feel the guilt of if I could only understand what he was saying, would he have survived? Officers told me that he had just had surgery for COPD and his wife had left him to go to a work trip. I am 911. I heard you on the radio the night you said you were just shot in the head. I am 911. Imagine going through a regular shift. It's your last hour. It's his last hour. He is dispatched to a domestic involving a family with a mentally ill male. He is familiar with the family, so he goes alone. He's invited in. Is normal. He goes in and feels a gun to his head. I hear over the radio, I was just shot in the head. It wasn't my agency. It was a neighboring agency. That agency lost a family member. That agency got to go through that together. I went home. I still hear him over the air today, the same way as I did that night, just before going home. I am 911. You called 911 because you found your 14-year-old son hanging in his room. I also have a 14-year-old son. I didn't sleep for days because I couldn't get your screams and pleas for help out of my head. I am 911.
So my call happened on Christmas Day, several years ago. I had family members showed up at their older brother's house to deliver Christmas presents. They walk in, there's blood everywhere, all over the house. So it was two of his younger brothers, the victim. They kept switching the phone, but I can't even tell you how long I was on the phone. It was a long time. Of course, Annie Alley did not work. And it was a country setting, so I started asking them what they passed by so that I could get the help tip. So eventually, after what seemed like forever, I would talk to one brother until he couldn't talk anymore. He would put the other brother on the phone that would talk to him. And it ended up that the older brother that they were trying to deliver presents to had committed suicide. First he shot himself, but he didn't shoot himself correctly. So then he goes from his bedroom into the kitchen and grabs a knife, tries to cut his wrist. That didn't do any good either because he didn't cut himself correctly either. So then he goes back into the bedroom, grabs the gun, goes into the basement, and ended up ultimately in the basement and shot himself again. But it took forever. It seemed like forever. And that was the one and only time that I actually had to get up from my chair and leave for a few minutes.
I recently had a call earlier this year where this lady called and she said that the house was on fire and she was upstairs. She started praying. And you could hear
dog in the background. What is that? He's like, that's my. She said they're in the trap. So there was 2 bedrooms side by side. So I did the EFD protocols, tried to get her down the steps. She couldn't. The fire was too hot. Everything we tried to do, nothing would work. I mean, there was the room that she was in had a very small window. It was an older house that she couldn't even find the window. It was so dark. She was coughing. Of course, the smoke was taking over. And I tried to get her to find a blanket to cover. She said, I keep my blankets in the closet. Let me see if I can, before she's coughing. So, my officers are on the way. Of course, fires as well. Officers get there. Fire truck pulls up. They start pulling ladders off and trying to get. In the meantime, I'm hearing her breathing start getting worse, and she was still pregnant. Breathing kept getting even worse and worse. And then she just stopped. And I could hear the firemen coming in because I could hear their packs making noises and stuff and then saying, where is she? Where is she? And I was screaming across the room, find her. What's taking them so long? Because it seemed like it was forever. And they finally got to her. I could hear her pull the cover off of her because she was under the cover. They finally got to her. They pulled her out of the house. They got her loaded up. And come to find out, I get a call from our chief who says, that's Missy's aunt. It was her mom's house, and Missy works. And so they ended up taking her to Savannah. She was in a rehab. Within a month, she was back home. And she's doing great. She still has some issues with her lungs and stuff, but she's very well. But those kind of calls, I've been 26 years, and they still have it.
I've been doing this 27 years. There are a handful of calls that I remember the voices. And one day it was a Sunday morning, and I took a 911 call, and it was from an elder who was crying, his wife crying in the background. He said, my 13-year-old granddaughter just shot herself. And I could hear his granddaughter in the background. Grandma had her laying in her lap. I asked what her name was. He said her name was Adriana. And he took the phone over, and I had EMS on the phone with us. And they, of course, lived way out in the farthest part of our county. And I stayed on the phone with him while he cried, and I cried, and Grandma cried, and Adriana breathed her last while I was on the phone with her. And he said that she had shot herself because she had made a mistake and had gotten pregnant. And she was so ashamed because her stepdad was the fire chief at their tiny little town, and she didn't want to embarrass her family. And hearing her breathing change and hearing her become agonal, and Grandma started screaming, and he started crying. I still wake up to that sound. And we had the briefing, and they let the grandparents come and meet me. And ironically, because it was such a small area, they let me take my German Shepherd. And that German Shepherd laid down on the floor, and the entire family laid their heads down on my dog and cried for like 20 minutes. And I will never forget her voice. I will never forget her for the rest of my life. Never. I took this call about a year and a half ago. I'm still pretty early into my 911 career, but this call will probably stick with me for the entirety of it for the rest of my life. Got a call, and I was taught pretty early on that you're going to sometimes answer phone calls and everything seems calm even though it's 911, or sometimes it's going to be already to that level 5 of hysteria where it's pretty difficult to get any information to even get them help. And I knew something was really wrong when I answered this phone call. Once I got enough information to get started, the mother finally said, "My son hung himself." And I quickly went over to, back then before we had Percue, it was our APCO cards. And I flipped over to the CPR and made sure that he was down and everything. For some reason, it stuck out to me to ask how old he was. And they said that he was 11 years old. And I just stopped for a second. Because you don't ever think going into something like that that it's going to be a child. And when I repeated back to them to verify to make sure I heard it correctly, when my center heard me say his age, everyone stopped with it. It just went completely silent in the room when they realized what exactly I had going on. And there's parts of the call that I don't remember. My supervisors will tell you that I tried stepping up their CPR. And by the time, my officers got there, they did what they could to do CPR on him. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. He was DOA. And it later on found out that it was due to some bullying that he did at school. He didn't tell anybody. We do the best that we can. And sometimes, when we're sending help, it's already a little too late. But I always like to I'll never forget him or that call. But it's just remembering that we're doing the best that we can.
So I'm not going to face you guys because I'll probably cry. I shared this story last year, and I still do it. I didn't actually take this call. I'm a training supervisor, so I do occasionally work the floor helping coverage for shift supervisors and things like that. So I was actually the shift supervisor for the day. Little background, I've worked at the same agency for 18 years. We're a consolidated agency. My husband also works there 19 years. He's a road patrol sergeant. He was also working that day. We took a call of a missing 3-year-old child. Some of you guys, when I say this story, it made national news. The 3-year-old child was missing. There was some situations that didn't really add up in the description from the family. Right off the bat, we got Casey Anthony vibes right away from the story. We had all kinds of mutual aid agencies with dogs, helicopters, everything over the course of the entire day. We got it early in the morning. When I left that night, I stayed extra, and so did my husband. I stayed extra because you always want to know, you want that closure, you want to figure out if the child's going to be found. When our agency decided to stop the search, we were all completely floored. We're like, no, you can't stop. No, absolutely not. You know what? We're going to go get four-wheelers. We're going to drive out there. We're going to look. We're going to search for this kid. The next day, only my husband and I maybe got 2 hours of sleep, if that. We both went back in the next day. And we knew we were on a search for a body at that point. My husband actually was questioning the boyfriend who was not the child's father. He was texting me throughout the day. He's like, I just want to take this kid out back and beat the shit out of him. He's like, I know he did it. So my husband was actually in the street crimes unit at the time. If anybody watches Chicago PD, we used to call him Voight. He's got a little bit of a temper, not with people, but so anyway. this kid had still obviously been missing at this point. There was nothing picked up by dogs. There was nothing picked up by helicopters. And we were all, the entire center was completely silent the next day. And I was actually, at this point, we knew we were looking for a body. So we switched all of our radio traffic over to a tactical channel so it wouldn't be picked up by scanners and things like that in case we did find a body. The public wasn't going to know about it first. So I was actually running the tactical channel. My husband was the incident commander on scene. And I kept texting him. We were texting back and forth all day. There's not much that bothers him. This bothered him more than anything in his entire career. And then all of a sudden he came across the radio and he said, "I found him." And he started crying on the radio. And of course it got me. The entire room went silent. And he was alive. 38 hours, a 3-year-old child was in the woods by himself. He was alive. He was not injured. He had a couple scrapes on his feet. And what's funny is that my husband went that morning to the Dollar General and he packed his work truck. He drove an F-150 unmarked, and he packed his work truck full of Capri Suns and gummy snacks in case he found him. So he was definitely prepared for when he found him, because he sent me a selfie of him and this little kid named JJ with the Capri Sun and the snacks. And that picture was all over the place, all over social media. And, it restored our faith that things can happen and have a good outcome, because in our career, nothing ever happens like that. We don't ever get, a child that's of that age been missing for over 36 hours and we find him alive. So we'll never forget it. And, it's something that definitely, like I said, it restored our faith that there's some good left in the world, and that the boyfriend didn't do anything terrible, which that was also good.
So mine's fairly recent. It was just on April 1st. My kid is in middle school and is part of the agricultural program. And I'm a huge animal person. I'm one of the barn moms. So the ag teacher is a close friend of mine. I've been to dinner. I've been to her house. So the call came in right around 5 in the morning. So I knew the address. And it was her. And she had been crying. And I told her it was me. And she woke up to her husband gurgling. So I instructed her to use CPR. And she couldn't get him off the bed because she's in remission for breast cancer, so she has no upper body strength. The sheriff's office got on scene and took over CPR. EMS got on scene, worked them for 22 minutes, and called DOA. 44 years old. They have a 22-year-old child, 10-year-old. I also lost my father the same way 15 years ago. I left work and went to the house, and I was there until they took him out of the house. And I was also standing with her when they told their 10-year-old that his dad wasn't alive anymore.
Hello. My story happened 2 years ago. I was 3 years in. I remember exactly where I was sitting. I had just come in for a shift. It was 2 p.m. It was really busy. We were short a person. And we just had 2 people taking phone calls. And I had just taken a call and I needed to go in. I got off the phone. I was going to hurry and put it in, but another 911 came in. I knew no one else could answer it, so I had to pick it up. And I was still trying to focus on getting my other call in because it needed to go in. And this lady gets on the line. I think it was a disconnected cell phone or something like that, and it was just off GPS. And it wasn't giving me anything close to where she was. While I was still trying to focus on this call, I wasn't giving her my the greatest attention. I still feel bad for it all the time. And I finally hurry and get that in, and then I'm trying to update her GPS to try and get it in, and she's trying to tell me where she's at the same time. And I'm telling her to hold on, like I'm just trying to get closer GPS to her. And I finally get it close to where she's at, and she's kind of out in a rural area. And I get a phone number and I say, okay, tell me exactly what happened. And she told me that she's been contemplating all day and that she decided she was going to kill herself. And at that point, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I haven't been giving you my attention. I've been trying to get this call in, and my tone wasn't the best. And so I say, okay, I want to help you. And she's like, no, I'm beyond help. I've made up my mind. I'm done. I just need you basically to send someone to get my body. And I keep telling her, no, I'm here. I care. I want to help you. And she's like, no, I'm done. She's like, can you just send someone? Can you send help? And I'm like, yeah, they've been on the way since I've grabbed your GPS. She's like, oh, so they're on the way? I said, yeah. And she hung up. And so I kept trying to call the number back that she gave me. She wouldn't answer. And luckily the fire department was closed, but when they got there, they called it. And that's the first and only phone call that I've taken that made me so sick I had to step outside. And I went and cried for a good 10 minutes. And I think it hit a trigger because I've had 2 cousins when I was in my early teen years that killed themselves, and that one just, I felt bad for that being there, and it eats at me every single day.
So I've been doing this for just over 16 years. This was actually my first year as a call taker. And I started off as a disconnect from a landline, which is pretty rare nowadays. But as I was going to call back, I happened to look over at the phone system and saw the same number pop up. So I quick, grabbed it. And it was a guy who had said that his 2-month-old baby had, he was on the couch and their 4-year-old had knocked the baby off the couch and the baby wasn't breathing. So I'm trying to start CPR, and then all of a sudden you start hearing a woman scream in the background. So at first I didn't really think anything of it, and then the responders got there, and then shortly after, a couple days later, they said they were going to have a debriefing. Baby didn't make it, and I'm sitting in the debriefing with a whole bunch of grown officers, all males, just start to tell the story. So what ended up happening is I found out later that the mom had taken the baby and slammed it into the ground. Sorry. Had subpoenaed to testify in court. We listened to this call over and over. I didn't know anything about PTSD at the time. And it wasn't until years later that I realized between that and another double child homicide case that I had taken 2 months later, they were all in a really short period of time that how bad that affected me. Just I'm super passionate about peer support and just always telling people to be sensitive to others, and you never know what call is going to be the one that sets you over the edge. But that was by far my whole career probably the worst one I think I've ever taken. So.
I work for a county agency. February 2019, I was working night shift, and I took a call from a man who said that he had a gun in his mouth, and he was crying. He was really upset, and I immediately started help, and I tried to de-escalate the situation and just talk to him. I asked him, why are you feeling this way? What's going on? And I got him talking. I found out his name, that he was only 19, and he told me some of the problems he was having. I felt like I was on the phone forever with him while I waited for officers to arrive. I ended up getting him to put the gun down, and I heard him, he set the phone down, he answered, just sobbing. And he got help that night, and I was so grateful that it didn't end that way. I wish that is where the story ended. In December, around Christmas time, the same year, I happened to be on shift when we got a call from the man's friend who found him shot. He didn't. I wish all the time that he would have reached out. And I've been dispatching about 8 years. A lot of the calls kind of start. He's one of those
ones. Thank you, all of you, for being here, for what you do every single day in this profession. Obviously, it's not an easy thing, right? Very stressful job, but not a lot of people can do this. You can. And I'm damn proud of every single one of you. Thank you for being here, for what you do, and for being here in support of each other. I'll say this really quick before we go to the next part. It's hard for me to describe what it is like to be in this session. The feeling. You enter and this starts and you realize the vibe is different, but also at the same time, it's a safe place. You're sharing stories with people who know exactly what it's like to go through it. And that's what this is all about. Every single one of your stories are important. And again, I hope you know how much you matter to this world. Round of applause for everyone who shared, please.
Welcome back, and thank you again to everyone who was there for that session. Those who came up to the booth and talked and just shared some stories with me there as well. It was just, as always, a powerful session. So thank you all very much, and thank you for what you do. I am currently out in Raleigh, North Carolina. It is October 8th, 2024, and I am going to be heading in there for the 8-hour course that I teach. This is now 4 of 4 classes that I have done out here, and it has been an amazing experience. Thank you to all of you and just everyone who's been impacted by the hurricanes that have been heading out in the area, but especially out in Asheville and other places in North Carolina. Thank you, all of you, for all that you do. There's no words. I've heard so many different things that are going on in the area, and just a lot of the types of calls that you guys are taking. So again, thank you. My heart goes out to all of you. Thoughts and prayers, all of it. Thank you so very much. This episode has been sponsored by Digital of Leader Next Gen Core Services. Big shout out again to all subscribers. And if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, whether you are new to dispatch, seasoned dispatch, or retired, I would love to share your story. I've been doing this for over a decade now. It is my passion, and I would love to share your story with literally millions from around the world. So thank you so much for everything. You can simply go to, or actually for the email, that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. And then to sign up, follow on social media, all that good stuff, you can go to links.co/WTT podcast. And that's links.co/WTT podcast, and you'll find everything there. Where to follow, where to hear the latest episode, where to order Imagine Listening books, just all of it. You can find it there. And I'm going to see you in the next one. You can see this on Facebook, YouTube, X, as well as LinkedIn Live. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. And I will see you all in the next one.